All right. So I'm going to be giving my thoughts on every book that I finished in January of 2025. I'm recording this a few days short, or a few days before the end of the month, rather. So I might finish a book or two if we're optimistic here. I'm in the middle of Command Authority by Tom Clancy. I still got a while to go, but maybe I'll finish it. If so, I'll put it in the February video or something like that. Let's gather up these books, though. I got the list on my phone. We're just going to do this stream of thought, consciousness style, and see where we go. All right. We've got the Leaning Tower of Pisa, however you say it. I'm not Italian, of books right now because I'm trying to put the stack in order so I can just grab off the top and give my thoughts like that in the order I finish the books. But due to the varying size of a lot of these books, shit's a little sketchy, but that's all right. So let's lock in. Without further ado, here is Persepolis 2. I also have Persepolis 1, um, just because I technically finished Persepolis 1 in December, near the end of December of last year, but I feel like Persepolis 1 and 2 are sort of a combo story. Like, you could read Persepolis 1 and leave it at that, but I feel like it's a cliffhanger ending and not as very satisfying as compared to if you read Persepolis 2. Yeah, so I thought this was really interesting. It takes place during I believe my memory's already foggy on this, so if I completely fuck up the historical accuracy here, if I can speak, my apologies. But yeah, um, I really enjoyed this look at the Iranian Cultural Revolution, I believe it is. I thought that Marjane Satrapi was a really genuine narrator. It really felt like this was a story, like her story that only she could tell. And I thought the artwork, it's nothing crazy, but it's got its own distinct style to it, which I can appreciate. And uh, I think that a lot of the ideas and themes that it covers are really interesting. And as just I feel like in history class, like in high school and even in college and stuff, it's a very Eurocentric viewpoint. Like, we didn't really talk about this. It wasn't until one of my last history classes I ever took in college, and I wasn't a history major, but history has always been one of my favorite subjects. So I just kind of took it as almost like an elective. But we talked about a bunch of revolutions. It was a great class. Shout out my professor if you somehow see this. I already forgot your name, dog. I'm sorry, but that was the first time I really learned about, in an academic setting, the Iranian Cultural Revolution and just like all the context, the Shah and all that. And so it felt cool to see that context or have that context like represented to me in this narrative form. And I think that it really gives you a good picture of like what it was the day-to-day life of, a young girl growing up in this time was. And I feel like I got a good perspective into just like culture and traditions and customs and how it's not like I think that when you look at countries or when other countries are presented to us rather, sometimes it's the people are presented as a monolith. They all share the same ideas and this and that. And I mean, even just looking at as a dude from the USA, we know that's not true. There's a lot of division, a lot of varying viewpoints and stuff. And I think that Marjane Satrapi does a really good job of representing that in this book. And I really liked it, and I just feel like I got a lot of perspective out of these two books here, that I wouldn't otherwise normally get. So I really appreciated them. Yeah, and let's see if I can do this without saying so many times for the next ones. All right, next up we got Blood and Bone. Now, for a little bit of context here, for those of you who haven't heard of Malazan, if you're into fantasy and you haven't checked out Malazan, highly recommend it. It's a really long series. I don't know how good the quality video is, but that shelf right there is like all Malazan. And that's not even all the books in the Malazan universe, but just there's the main 10 books by Steven Erikson. That's called Malazan Book of the Fallen. And then his co-author, Ian C. Esselmont, wrote another 6 books that kind of fill in the gaps between those 10 books and also just other parts of the world, and they also have their own story called Novels of the Malazan Empire. And this is book five of the Novels of the Malazan Empire series. So this I ended up reading. It was the first book I read after I finished the main 10 because in like the chronological reading order, which is my first time I'm trying to go through in chronological order, or it's like more publishing order, but also chronological order, is this comes after the main 10. And I only have one book technically left in the main 16, as you could say, which is A Sale. I'm really excited to get into that. But yeah, enough yapping about the other books. Blood and Bone. I really like this one. I was a little iffy on it at points. Every Malazan book kind of has the formula where it's like a few POVs and they're all kind of just moving around and then like they'll bump into each other and something happens. But I mean, damn, it's a great formula and it works here. And this book in particular explores a setting that is shrouded in a lot of mystery in the main 10 books. And you visit it, I believe, in book two of Novels of the Malazan Empire. Yeah, I'm also going spoiler mode on this shit. Just a heads up. So yeah, maybe skip this if you're trying to get into Malazan and you aren't far into it because I'm about to blow a bunch of shit out of the water here. But this takes place, I believe, around the same time as Stonewielder, which I believe takes place around the same time as book 8, 9, 10, which all kind of take place around the same time. So I'm no chronology expert, just based on what's happening in the book with the visitor and the crippled god and stuff like that. That's where it seems to take place. And there's also this point where you get the other side of something that happened in book three, which I thought was really cool. But back to the setting, the continent of Jakruku. If I'm mispronouncing that, my bad. I'm about to butcher hella pronunciation because this is all fantasy nerd shit and I've never heard it spoken out loud to another human being. That's tough. But Jakruku, it kind of reminds me of Hawaii a little bit, at least the way it's described and stuff. I was really lucky to have a chance to spend a few days in Hawaii in October, and the description of the lush vegetation and stuff like that, it might be more like Amazon rainforest, but in my head, the one-to-one to Hawaii, or like the, not one-to-one, but the the way it was described in the book kind of reminded me a lot of Hawaii. And so that's kind of the image I had. So it was cool. You don't really get like these tropical sort of island settings in fantasy stories, and especially in Malazan. Has a very big variety of settings. And so it's just cool to see this one fleshed out because this is one that wasn't really mentioned in the main ones. But I really liked getting oh man, a Yakshaka character, Hanu, and his sister Sayang. They're really cool. I low-key think that Skinner went out like a total bitch in this book. Skinner is built up, one in the main 10, he's mentioned a lot as being a beast, but he's never really shows up directly in the main 10. But there's this one character, and I'm pissed this plot line kind of, I don't think will ever get resolved. There's this one, Segula, this epic swordsman who's undead, and he's like chasing Skinner down like book to book, and he like appears randomly in random books. He's just like, Skinner! And he's like, just really clearly wants to fuck this guy up. But he doesn't show up. Skinner is like this famed swordsman. Everyone is glazing him up, and he's just like has this sick armor. And then all that happens is his armor turns into spiders and eats him. Like he doesn't even get like a cool final fight. Like he does have a sick fight with like this monster creature where he like cuts himself out, which I thought was sick as fuck, and maybe kind of redeems it. He has some cool fight scenes in this book for sure. But I just feel like I wanted more Skinner doing badass stuff, and I wanted him to go out in a cooler way, especially because it seemed like he was sort of. I thought he was going to be like more of the main antagonist of these books, but they murked him before the last one, and he just kind of went out like kind of a bitch. So that's disappointing. Skinner, if you can hear this in Malazan Heaven, come on, bro. Really? Got eaten by some fucking spiders. Lame as hell. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I feel like I could talk about Malazan books for a lot longer, but I'm not trying to drag this shit on too much. The Green Brain by Frank Herbert. Now, I am a big, big fan of Dune, but I haven't read any other books by Frank Herbert until now. And this book is a science fiction book with an ecological focus in terms of its themes. And just honestly, in this book, it's really direct and like just like the setup of the world and stuff. And I really, really enjoyed like the first 75 to 100 pages. It's a short read. I read this in like a couple of days. And I mean, first of all, there was no green baddies doling out brain in this book, so that kind of sucked. But on a more serious note, I don't know. A lot of the characters just felt a little bit flat or kind of boring, and I don't know. The plot was like had a really cool setup, and then it was just like three characters stuck in like a pod, basically going down a river for like maybe more than half the book, honestly. And I don't know. It was cool, and there's some tense moments, but I feel like the coolest parts were like the beginning and end, and the middle was just like a bit of a slog. I get what he was going for. I don't think it was perfectly effective. I really did like I liked how they did the introduction. So they introduced like there's like three main characters, and two of them are kind of villainous, but they introduced them as more of the hero characters. And villainous and hero, I say because it's Frank Herbert, and nothing's like super morally black and white in this. But then the Bandeirante, which fun fact, Bandeirantes were like explorers and slavers back in Brazil, like that discovered the not discovered, but like would go into the Amazon rainforest in expeditions. Like they were like I believe Portuguese or like colonists. So it was a cool reference to that historical fact. They called them Bandeirantes in this book, and what they do is they basically go and kill like unwanted bug life because that's kind of there's like this whole ecological war in this book basically in Brazil and in other parts of the world, and it's really just like about how you really can't eliminate like anything from the ecosystem, like it all has its place and whatnot, and it's pretty like pretty on the nose, I would say. But I still enjoyed like the thematic elements, and I definitely think some of our world leaders today could really do with a read of a book like this that would just beat them over the head with something like that. But I'm totally rambling. But the main character, Johnny, as they call him, he's introduced almost in like a villainous way, and I think that he actually was the coolest character and ends up being more of the heroic one. But just the way he introduced him was really cool and it stuck out to me. And also, the last lines of this book are fire. He's like, "There is sunshine in the morning. Let the sun work on your skin and the chlorophyll in your blood. And when you come back here, tell me if the sun is your slave." Now, there's like this whole last passage of the book is kind of about like the slave dynamic. And originally, the book was called, I think, published as Green Slaves in like a serialized format. But now it's called The Green Brain. Um, and honestly, I can't really dive into the thematics of that line. I just didn't sit there with it as long as I should have, but I just thought it was a cool line. But yeah, that's The Green Brain. It was all right. Uh, that Frank's definitely got some better work, but it's definitely better than like when you get to the end of the Dune series and it's just like horned up space witches having sex with 15-year-old clones. Like, come on, man. So I will say he did a better job on that. Actually, one other thing is the female main character in this book felt like she was literally just around to be like sexualized, and like that was kind of like her like she has some other moments, but like everyone else in the book kind of sees her as like a sex object, and so I don't know if that's what Frank was going for. It just kind of felt like the one chick in the book really like you could have done her a little bit more justice in my opinion, but I mean it was the 60s and it's Frank Herbert, so he wasn't getting too freaky with it, I guess. All right. This was my very first ever H.P. Lovecraft read here. This is At the Mountains of Madness and Other Tales of Terror. So this is, I believe, four little tales here. You got At the Mountains of Madness, The Shunned House, The Dreams in the Witch House, and The Statement of Randolph Carter. Now, this book is like 200 or it's like 180 pages, and like the first 110 are like At the Mountains of Madness. So that's the one that I'm going to talk about the most because that's the one. It was the best tale, and it took up most of the book. It's like this Arctic expedition, and they uncover some absolutely freaky shit. This crazy city. It was very Lovecraftian, obviously. And I like know what to expect from Lovecraft. I feel like just because he's influenced so many things, but just reading it was like, yeah, yeah, like this is Lovecraftian. Kind of exactly what I expected. And I liked the first story. It dragged a little bit at points. Uh, the other three stories, The Shunned House was like like old-timey Ghostbusters almost at the end, but it was just kind of shitty. Like I didn't really care. Dreams in the Witch House was the second best one for sure. And it's just like this dude absolutely tweaking beyond belief in his dreams until he does some fucked up shit, which like, all right, like it was solid, nothing crazy. I saw Nosferatu. It almost reminded me of that a little bit, but Nosferatu did it better. But it's not even like remotely. It's a little bit comparable. That's why I brought it up, but it's not a one to one. And then the Statement of Randolph Carter is just like this little 5-page story at the end. It's like, and it just feels like it just retreads the same ground as the Shun House and the Dreams in the Witch House a little bit. So I don't know. Overall, it was solid, I guess. Not too crazy about this one. Next up, it's my first reread of the month. We got V for Vendetta, and yeah, oh, this ain't a book. It's a graphic novel or a comic, whatever you want to call it. Um, I think I really appreciated this. I liked this the first time I read it a few years ago, but I feel like as I've grown and matured over the last few years, and I have a different, maybe not different, but a more, I've had more political context just given to me and that I've absorbed, and so I think that this is a very political graphic novel, and it really benefits from that extra context, and its message hits a lot harder. And I mean, the artwork is just absolutely fucking beautiful, and I, I don't know. I'm trying to think of. It's hard to speak too much on this because there's so much like political messaging and stuff that I just feel like I'm not really qualified to speak on too much here. But overall, great book. V is a really interesting character. I really like Evie as well, and I like how all the party members of like the opposing, like the fascist party, are very fleshed out. And yeah, basically this book covers like a conflict between like a anarchist revolutionary in the UK after a fascist party takes over after some hard times, which is a message that definitely is hitting harder today as things kind of seem like they're going to shit a little bit. And people, what will they turn to for safety and yada, 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 us versus them. Just a lot of stuff like that that I think really hits home. I'm sure this hit home in the 80s or whenever this came out, I think 80s. And it hits home today for sure. I mean, I can't really speak on actually how it hit home in the 80s because I wasn't alive, but today I definitely feel this. I think it's an important graphic novel, an important piece of literature in general with some beautiful artwork and a great story and great messaging. Fire. All right, getting down to it here, we've got The Arabian Nights. Now, this book, it's really like a collection of oral tales that were passed down from way back in the day. I believe most of them are actually originally Persian tales, but then they kind of got collected by Arabic writers or something, or passed down the Arabic tradition. And a lot of these tales are Islamicized. At least that's what the introduction says. And the introduction and the notes by Musin al-Musawi, I really actually, I thought added a lot of good context at the beginning. Just to give you like a little bit of the history around the time that this came out and just like how the story's evolved and stuff. And it wasn't like one of those introduction that like completely spoils the book, which I appreciate. I fucking hate like when I was reading the Iliad and it just like spoils that whole shit at the beginning. Like, dude, like yeah, I know it's a million-year old story, but like, come on, man, like don't be spoiling that. But yeah, so this book is a collection of I think almost maybe even more than 300 different disparate stories, and the way it's framed is there is a sultan whose wife cheats on him basically, and so he like has beef with all women, and he marries a new wife and then has her executed the next day, like every single day, like clockwork. But this one lady, I believe the daughter of his like grand vizier, which is like his most trusted advisor, Shahrazad is her name. She marries him and then like tells him stories each night, and he's like, "Oh, I want to hear the end of the story, so I'll let you live another night." Until eventually, like, yeah, he pardons her. Uh, but like that's just sort of the framing story. It like pops up a few times to remind you that it's there, and then it's just an excuse for a bunch of these other little stories. And then even within those stories, like more stories get told. Like one of the first stories is like this old man and this genie, and then, like the genie is gonna kill him because he accidentally throws a date pit and it blinds his son and kills him or something, which is just crazy. Like, how does that even happen? Side note, I love dates, so if I ever killed someone eating a date, like I'd still keep eating dates. But uh, I'm getting sidetracked here. These three old wise men like basically tell the genie a story. Within that story that Shahrazad's telling about the old man who's about to get executed by the genie for killing his son, and the genie like pardons 1/3 of the dude's sentence every single time one of the wise men tells a story, so it's like more stories in one. And there's a lot of cases like that throughout the book. But since it's such a disparate collection, not disparate, but it's a collection of tales, some tales obviously hit harder than others. Some I enjoyed more. I definitely think here, I'm trying to fit in the table of context or contents rather. Um, the stories about Noreddin, if I'm pronouncing that right, and the Beautiful Persian, and then the history of Camaralzaman, Prince of the Isle of the Children of Khaladan, and Badora, Princess of China. They're like two love stories, and they're just like pretty long, and they're like really. A lot of the stories in this are short, like maybe even 10 pages or less, or maybe like 15. And these are like 50 or 60, and they just feel like really sluggish to read through. And so it made that part of the book. It took me longer to read this book than maybe it should have. I was just kind of not excited to read those stories, so I kind of got stuck for a few days. Versus like in other ones, like you're getting a new story every 10 minutes, so you can build up that momentum. But yeah, I really liked the Sinbad the Sailor stuff because it's a longer section of the book, but it's like he has 7 voyages, and all of them are kind of outlined in their own tale, so it really breaks it up well. Also, I appreciated the last story. The story about Aladdin was 100 pages. Did it need to be? Absolutely not. There was definitely some serious fluffage in there, uh, unfortunately. But I have never seen the Disney movie Aladdin, so I was dead ass experiencing the Aladdin story for the first time, and I thought it was really interesting. Uh, it was cool to finally experience that. I wonder how accurate the Disney movie is to it. Probably not crazy accurate. And then also learning the origin of Open Sesame. There's like this dude who sees these robbers who have like a secret hideout in a rock, and the way they open the way to the rock is they say Open Sesame. That was cool because like it's like, oh, Open Sesame, is that where that comes from? And yeah, it is where it comes from. So that's pretty funny. It was cool to get the context for that. Overall, Arabian Nights, I'd say overall really cool and interesting, and it was really cool. I feel like I got a lot of insight into that period of history, especially in that time, like the Islamic Empire and stuff like that. We don't learn about that a lot in school as well. Like I mentioned with Persepolis earlier, we have a very Eurocentric viewpoint, so I felt like I was getting a lot of context and just interesting history and learning about like culture and customs I just haven't been exposed to. So I really appreciate it for that extra perspective because if there's one thing I try to do through just my reading my life is collect a lot of extra perspectives just to inform my own. And I feel like I learned a lot about the customs and stuff like that. And also, yeah, there's some good characters in here, and then a lot of the characters are kind of like all act the same, and you wouldn't be able to differentiate them. Like I really like Caliph Harun al Rashid. He's like they call him the commander of the faithful. He's like the religious emperor, maybe. Honestly, I could be butchering my understanding of that political structure there. But I thought he was a really interesting character, and he recurs throughout it a lot, and even plays a hand in some of the stories. He hears some of the stories. He's a player in some of the stories. It's just so there's some cool characters in there, and yeah, I'd say overall this is definitely worth a read, but just be prepared for a couple slog stories, and it's worth it though overall. And finally, last but certainly not least, we've got Kingdom Come by Mark Wade and Alex Ross. I do not think I actually said the author well for Arabian Nights it's anonymous, it's Question Tales, but for V for Vendetta it's Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. Alan Moore, if you're into comics or like shit at all, like he's just crazy wet at writing stories, and they're all fire, or at least all the ones I've read. Like I got Watchmen back there, probably due for a reread soon. Stuff like that. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But yeah, back to the topic here. We got Mark Wade and Alex Ross with Kingdom Come. It's mainly a Superman Elseworld story in DC, and I'm a big Superman fan. I'm a big comic nerd. Um, And the artwork in this is just gorgeous. I can't do it justice by like holding it up, but it's like Alex Ross. He did like I think like oil paintings and shit for like every panel, and it just looks beyond beautiful. Like it's just like so many jaw dropping, and every panel is so detailed. Like it's amazing. It really is. Like it's a visual spectacle, and the story itself is awesome. It's just like a lot of great themes. A uh, really good. I'd say maybe even introduction to Superman, like in what Superman's supposed to be, and like superhuman's role in shepherding humanity, and if that should even be a thing. And it has so much detail in like the background panels and all these cool heroes that you see in like Alex's Ross's kind of interesting like retro future style. He has some really cool designs and concepts in here, like Green Lantern, just having a giant space fortress, and it's Alan Scott Green Lantern, like the OG Green Lantern, and he's got like a Green Lantern suit of medieval armor and a giant fucking sword. Like, yeah, that's sick as fuck. And like the Flash, he still protects his city. It's like a new era of superheroes, but he still protects the city. But he's just going so fast, like it just like every wrong gets righted, and like in between the seconds, as they put it, he's like barely even like a physical presence. And like every single, I don't even think he has any lines in it, but every single time he's like in the focus, like he's just like blurry and like I don't know. He's just really well done, and it's hard to describe unless you read it. But I gotta say, man, come on, Captain Atom, dude, literally exists just to get fucking blown up. Like his design is sick, though. I will say, like beyond sick. But justice for Captain Atom. But yeah, this is just fire. I This was also a reread, I should say. I'm a broke ass, and I can't just be buying new comics. So I've been rereading a lot of my older comics. And yeah, that was every single book that I've read this month so far, as of January 26th, 2025. And yeah, take it easy, y'all.